Útráin is a útráin nó tufa is buil déantas na maclan a fada wére tó fircin óchas sarm fe I mé láchan slua ag an cógáil seo do gohíle sa dúiog for se fircin óchas sarm glocha le cur Gary Redmond tírt. It gave me great pleasure to accept Gary Redmond's invitation to join you this morning as you come together to discuss your plans for the year ahead. Agus igúni is the aslam neric in dini oga múla fuinúla eshkant atá gafa leis in antas agus atá Janov unaíocht dar sa gobar go fanvar san wachlan ar skakort and tír. Thank you, President, for your kind remarks in relation to my St. Patrick's Day invitations. It was a very interesting afternoon. Many people who were coming to Oris and Uachtaráin for the first time, but also it was part of a strategy of inclusion and of citizenship, which I spoke about during the campaign. May I begin by saying it has always been a very great pleasure to speak at the Union of Students in Ireland in different circumstances, in different venues. It's a very long time ago now. And you know, as they shifted in and out of different political versions of the world, the Union of Students in Ireland was most interesting. I was a president of Intas na Machlainn in Cólateachta na Machlainn in 1965. And when I produced my student card, there was one stage during that long incarnation of 47 years, whatever it is now. The fact of the matter is that somebody thought that because I'd reproduced my student card, it was political. And some right-wing students asked for it to be removed from the election office as involving the students in politics. But then we all survived together. And there was a happy ending. But I think that I wanted to say something about that time in a way. It is something to which I would like to just say a few words in a moment about third-level colleges and universities. It's a matter that I've been speaking recently about in the London School of Economics, but also at the National University when I was receiving an honorary doctorate from that institution. And I want to say a few more words about that this morning too. But before I say anything else, you quoted, President, some of the things I said during my campaign, and certainly in my inaugural speech. I spoke of my wish for the people of Ireland to come together and work to achieve an alternative set of values to those which permeated this society during the era of the Celtic Tiger. I realise as well that over the 14 months I was on the road visiting communities and groups all over Ireland, that a task had to be done to make the case for a different set of values than those which prevailed. R.H. Doney, the historian, has a very famous image where he asks, I think in one part of his work, why is it that tadpoles put up with their miserable existence? And the answer he gives is that in the expectation that some of them will one day sprout a jaw and leap to earth and become a frog. And there was a sense during the 10 or 15 years of the values that prevailed that seemed to suggest that it was worth staying quiet about values because your turn might come. You could leap to earth and become a frog in comparison to the tadpoles that prevailed in Tony's sense. But what was at the base of, I think, that 10 or 15 years, I don't intend to just go on about it, was a kind of individualism that was very importantly different from the defense of the person. Over my long existence in universities and teaching and in politics and in the public world, language suffers regularly. So the words personal rights, for example, get confused with words like individualism. But the individualism we saw was one that was based in terms of valuing people in terms of financial worth. And And it was as if it was a kind of new assault on the world, and we were there, and we had taken the most booty. So people would say, "Did you hear? He's bought half of London." And it's no, said, "We bought the other half," and it goes on and on and on. But people had kind of this notion. It was quite different, I might say, from Pirates of the Caribbean, because even in the film you were allowed rather some gentler side of the Caribbean and of the pirates, but in this case none. It was unending, open acquisitiveness and the way of the world. And this kind of assumption, these assumptions, were very much superior to any other social considerations. I spoke in my presidential inaugural address then of the need, as you have said, for an active, inclusive citizenship, the need for, capable of, and committed to disassembling any and all obstacles to people's full participation in society. Now, let me say here immediately that one of the great changes, it's important to note good changes. When I was president of the Students' Union in Galway back in the 1960s, it would have been nearly impossible for somebody with a wheelchair to attend university. There have been many real gains in relation to access to courses, in relation to recognition of particular difficulties, and right at the front of these, why do I come to Union of Students in Ireland conferences quite often? Really to recognise the work and the value of the advocacy that was done by the Students' Union on all of these issues. Something I want to say a bit more about in relation to the equality issues. The need to create then an inclusive citizenship capable and committed to disassembling any and all obstacles to people's full participation in society, to create a kind of Irishness of which we might be proud in terms of inclusion. And I spoke of this being fitted within a creative society, not just creative in the areas that are mostly associated with the time I was working as Minister for Culture and the Arts and Film or whatever, but creative in everything we do. Creative in the ability to speak differently in response to a problem and so on. Creative in how we deal with each other above all else. And I said that if we are to do this, there is need for a kind of transformation. A deep transformation, not just in changing the electoral system, which might or might not be a good idea. The transformation I spoke of was a transformation in consciousness, in values, in institutions and behaviour. And this has to happen if we are to achieve change. For example, universities and third-level institutions were not neutral from what I have just described in relation to the property component of a speculative economy. Many of them facilitated the language that kept all of this going. And this to me is quite serious. But moving on, I spoke in my inaugural address then of that transformation that must take place. And at this time in our history, I don't think that anyone would argue that we do really need to have a debate and redefine values and seek values which will enable the creation of a real economy, a sustainable economy, and that it will carry ethical assumptions, and it one that reflects the best communal value system and dealing with the needs of the people who live in it. You see, the interesting side of it was, I found yesterday, among the few boxes of books I've moved from Galway to the Oras, Francis Fukuyama's book on the end of history and The Last Man. After 1989, particularly in the fall of the Berlin Wall, an extraordinary hubris went through political systems and also through economics. The assumption that there was a single model of economic development for the world. And standing underneath that were sets of philosophical assumptions which really should have been tested by those who had the opportunity to do so. The assumptions in relation that, for example, that the centrality of acquisitiveness in the human psyche, but maybe the most important and the greatest, if you like, fiction that continues to go on in intellectual work is the assumption that markets are rational. This was contested in the United States by the two Galbraiths, father and son, who suggested the argument always against them was, you haven't It's when the global economy expands to a point, the rationality of it all will begin to be clear. You end up in the absurd position of regarding markets as rational and the people as irrational. You would then try to adjust it, and you suggest that the future for all the citizens who may wish to work in the different single version of the economy is a rational choice maximising units. You're continually saying, but life is not like that. It has never been like that. This is a dangerous fiction, but it is like something that has permeated scholarship to the point at which you just didn't contradict it. But universities and third-level institutions should be always about handling contradictions. I think myself that every citizen in this country, not only those in colleges, has a part to play in redefining these values. And it is encouraging to see, as I said, so many younger people prepared to take an active part in that debate. For the world ahead, as I have said, will be ones of very rapid change. And there will be changes in the models of relationships, of economy, of culture and society, of political organisation, of international relations, and between nature itself and our fragile planet, of concepts of responsibility, accountability, and of justice, of public office and service will emerge. And all these institutional structures at the moment, what are the ones I've listed? So many serious institutions have lost trust. There's been an erosion of trust, and if it is to be built back, it has to be on a basis that is earned on something substantial. About third level itself, there are things I just like these days to brighten up for the sake of those who follow my speeches. I put in little pieces that occur to me, sent to me by the Holy Spirit or whatever, as I travel to different venues. And it also lends a kind of an element of unpredictability, which brightens one's life. Now, I want to say that about third-level colleges and universities, there are issues that it seems to me are not being faced, even by some of those who have recently announced that they agree very much with what I have been saying. And this has created a complex response from me. As I have given speeches recently about the future, some very serious people in the universities have leaped to their feet, they've just leapt, as they would say in Clare, to their feet, suggesting they agree with me. But at the same time I said, have I put it wrong, or did I misunderstand what they've been doing? So I just wanted to say a few little small points that are practical, it seems to me. If I have one regret as a university teacher of nearly two decades, and not only in Ireland but in England and in the United States, it is that I didn't give even more time than I did listening to students. There are practical things that never get said. If a student survived as far as Christmas, students were coming from places where family members had never. I was myself, no one belonged to me everywhere near a university. I was 21 years of age when I went. Now, the important point is there is a certain strangeness in a new setting, and you are very much at risk. And sometimes it's very confusing. And even at postgraduate level, I found it when I was at Manchester University. You were a kind of an exotic because you were from a different place. People would say to me in the anthropology department, you must tell us sometime about your own people, as if I was the Azande or the Nuer or whatever. Now, the question about that, what arises there is, we really should have been, if a student made it in my time in UCG, as it was then, to Christmas, they had a good chance of lasting the year. And if they made it as far as the summer, they got some kind of a degree of whatever. It was important to be able to listen, not just in terms of the education, but in terms of what the person was experiencing. I was recently in Bolton Street and was very happy with some of the stories I heard about people and the need for flexibility and adjustment and so forth and so on. But what kind of a scholastic institution or what kind of community of learning is it? If you hire a very important person who can bring investment to your university but doesn't want to teach the main body of undergraduate students. Oh, I was in a university, a very famous one in the United States, where I took courses myself, where the professor wanted to have all his teaching done by 10 o'clock, because he wanted to concentrate on his career, effectively move from the institution he was in. You just cannot not address these issues. Teaching is one of the most important things in third level, the quality of the teaching. But I have sat on boards, I was a member of governing bodies, and I can in truth say, I never saw the capacity to teach and communicate as the top of the list in making an appointment. Now, what does Dodge say? Yes, teaching is important, research is important. What is even more important as well is then the experience you have, or that students and teachers have together in a community of learning. Well, what kind of lack of nerve does it reveal then, when instead of addressing these issues that are in front of your face, you decide to start comparing yourself to English language speaking universities all over the world and simply say, you know, the same as you would, for example, as Rory McIlroy is number 1 or number 2 in the world in relation to golf. Where is our university in the international rankings? Now, I mean, those of us interested in research would say, isn't it odd that all the things that people are being compared with happen to be English speaking? That there isn't, the University of Cairo isn't involved, and any of the great universities across the world. So these are issues that I believe must be faced into the future. And I think that the student presidents and the student activists who are here, yes, you will be doing different things in advocacy for the day-to-day, but also in your representation on the councils and governing bodies of universities, you have the right to ask these questions about the kind of university and third level education we need in this country in times of change, and you have the right to do, you have the responsibility to do so, not only for yourself, but for others to come. You have the right, and you must have the courage to allow for the break that is necessary as we move on, and to ask what is visionary. As I've said, USI's advocacy record is first class. I think that in relation to, and I think as well, the equality issues that I referred to earlier about lesbian, gay, bisexual students, their right to be free in a third level setting to express themselves properly. So I think too a more active and critical participation of a young generation is pivotal at this time of economic and social upheaval, and I think it will generate hope, and it will shape the development of the society itself. As I turned to just wanted to say to you, the issues are all danger. It was rather exotic and simpler in my time back in the 1960s. I actually organised one of the very first student protests in 1965. We went from the Archway out to Salt Hill with placards, I remember. What the issue was that landladies in Galway at that time, there were such things as landladies. There were very few flats that later became apartments several decades later. But at any event, anyway, when the summer came and the earnings were from tourists got a bit better, students were just kind of first moved out the back and sometimes moved on altogether. So we had a little protest about this. I remember the placards, well, very funny ones because we were all very original at the time, but I remember. Now, as I said recently, which I have to be careful, is that one said, I remember 3 in a bed is too many, and someone else is that. I said probably we reached a stage where I was later in university where people would say 3 in a bed is not enough, but we have to move on. I think that in relation to some other points, and to be very serious about what I have to say, I think that it is the task to finish what I have to say about universities. A very famous computer scientist once said, it is not the task of the university to offer what society asks for, but to give to society what it needs. And you have a role in that, in deciding what society needs. It is important for young people to be given the opportunity then, not to be mirror images of adults in the world around them, but to become inspirational to those around them. And I wish you well in that. Johann Gottfried von Herder said, without inspiration, the best powers of the mind remain dormant. But there is a fuel within us which needs to be ignited with sparks. There will be opportunities for our third-level institutions to lead us into a new engagement with our current circumstances, and students will have a critical role to play in developing that new discourse. As I've said, the current paradigm in economics, I'm not suggesting discard everything. I simply say question it. Be able, in fact, to produce a scholarship that is genuinely emancipatory, genuinely original, and that restores, for example, the unity between sciences and culture, unleashing rather than squashing human curiosity, discovery, and celebratory impulses. I had a visit to the Orspot last week from a Nobel Prize winner in physics, and he said, I said to him, do they really know how it happens? He said. It isn't in a linear way of drudgery or whatever. He says, you get ready for what will be given to you as an insight, and so on. And it was with him I was sharing the joke as well, that most of the great people in relation to discovery were regarded as nuts until they were proved right, and then they were immediately regarded as geniuses. So the exciting people, the genuinely original people, innovative people, are those who are able to draw on the different sources of knowledge and wonderment together. And I think myself as well, when I was speaking in the LSE, I said that Ruth Levitas, for example, from the University of Liverpool, has gone back and taken Ernst Bloch's work, which is The Politics of Hope. And she has said, you see, people always said the kind of things that I would be speaking is, that's just simple utopianism. Bloch did not speak of that kind of utopianism. It's one thing to recognize what's wrong in the present, and another to postulate an alternative. But the really difficult issue is to see in what is the transforming possibilities, to be able then to attach yourself within government systems and in the context and contingent conditions that arise, so that you are not just developing an alternative that is independent from everything that is. It is possible to make all of those changes, and that is some of the things, these themes are occurring. We are, in my presidency, offering a number of presidential seminars. One is on being young and Irish. It was intended to be being young in Ireland, but because so many young people emigrate and leave, and I want to emphasise that they are part of the Irishness that I speak of, and of which I am president for, that it is now called Being Young and Irish. And that will take, we are going to have consultations in the regions during the year, and all these issues will come up. Next year I intend to have a seminar on ethics, and I will bring some international consideration to that in relation to the connections between science, technology and society, economy and society, ethics in practice, most importantly ethics at a time when so many institutions have lost trust. May I congratulate USI on what you have achieved, particularly in relation to mental health. This is just so important. Your initiative, the one for the most people to write to contribute writing a story with 953 participants, that was excellent. The mental health directory is enormously valuable, and also I think as well the fact that you have chosen Pieta House as your charity is to your credit. I have to say, and I say truthfully, my background as a sociologist alerts me to particular problems that are facing us. I spoke recently of the pernicious racism and homophobia that wreak havoc in the lives of so many young people. That is so connected to the suicide rate, that results in negative self-attributions, in loneliness, isolation, exclusion, violence, violence itself at the hands of others, and often violent self-destruction itself. We need to look inwards and ask, how does this happen? How does racism gain its foothold? How does homophobia get going? And when does it start? And who supports it in its destructive work? And how isolation and loneliness have become the reality for so many young people. That's the Ireland that has to be changed. This has to be changed. And I have to say, looking around the institutions who have been active, USI, it is to their credit the different actions that they have taken. I have every confidence that we can, by facing these issues and working together, combat these and other poisonous prejudices, that a new Ireland will emerge, and that our solidarity will defeat hate and bigotry, which will not be tolerated, not take hold or grow roots. I have to say, and it's difficult, but it's necessary, that it would be remiss of me not to mention what I feel to be the serious grip alcohol and other sources of dependency have taken on our society. So much life has been wasted, so many close friends lost, families distressed. I've often quoted the late Raymond Williams, who has said, "Be the arrow, not the target." But it is appropriate for people of your generation more than most. Be the target and you are letting yourself be marginalised from the fullness and capacity of your life. Be the arrow and you are an instrument of change in your own life and the life of others. As there are challenges with negative intonations for the future, it's full of opportunities too. All this can change. There's something particularly ridiculous about having to say, in order to engage with other people, I have to get wasted first. It's one of the great changes in Irish drinking pattern, is that in the other justifications, it would say in court, it crept up on me. Well, I think there's a suggestion, one of the things, we have to seriously deal with this problem. I think that young people have the opportunity to know more about the appropriate connection as well between science, technology and society. This generation and the one just immediately before it are far ahead in relation to responsible social ecology. May I finish by saying something that I think is important, that has struck me in recent times as I've gone around, as I've talked to different people. It is the most exciting, positive vindication of friendship that is taking place in a generation of Irish people. It was Aristotle who said that the ethics of friendship make a demand that are greater than the ethics of justice. Why? Because friendship is a gift. But friendship is a gift that carries the burden of authenticity. So therefore it has always been difficult, as the literature tells us, for true friends to tell something true but uncomfortable to a close friend. But what I have seen in the reads of these young people who have been killed tragically or whatever, are messages like, "You were always there for me," describing, for example, a kind of loneliness that was at the heart of our society based on consumption. But at the same time, a great spiritual warmth of care and concern, and being able to offer something that is powerfully spiritual at a time when so many rule-making institutions have lost trust. I think as well, in many cases, that these are anxious times for many of you. All I'll say is Eliot, the poet, once said, "Anxiety is the handmaiden of creativity." I think he overstressed it, frankly. But one of the things I want to say to us, our complete Marfocal Square, almost 53 years in existence, Aontas na Machlan in Air in USI, representing 250,000 students in over 40 colleges, has left an indelible mark on higher education, and also on graduates through the benefits of its campaigns. And many, many people who will never be here will benefit from its campaigns, its advocacy and its representation. I urge you now to be as imaginative and creative in rebuilding our country, in building a real Ireland. And you know why people like myself, really I say it with humility, the inspiration will be in yourselves. The only thing I can offer, and I offer it with humility, is to suggest to you that you come to know that between each other, with each other, working together with each other, you will be able to acquire all that inspiration that is there, the great powerhouse of the ethical and spiritual, to create an entirely different kind of society. And to have made the effort to do that is what is important. And it will empower you all your lives in this short life that we have. And I wish you every success with your annual conference. And I want this to say to you as well. If we are in difficult times, we're also on the verge of boundless possibilities, what I have described as our féidirtí gan seoladh. So I invite the students of Ireland, and in particular the leadership of the Union of Students in Ireland, to rise to the challenge of building and shaping their shaped future with its inclusive citizenship in a creative society, bringing into existence an Irishness of which we'll all be proud at home and abroad, and that will constitute, I believe, a real republic. Malafshim Gomoras and Abratakar are for Agi, is Guim Gakrari and Taki, is thus Naplianta Tolechia. Thank you, President.